Hi everyone, I'm Greg Woodland. I'm the author of a book called The Night Whistler. It's a rural crime book set in a fictionalised New England, New South Wales outback country town in 1967. And it was inspired by a true story my mother told me. Many years ago, myself and my 4 little brothers were kids growing up in a number of country towns. Our dad was a commercial traveller who used to travel around way out west a lot. One particular year, he was gone for weeks on end, leaving my mother alone to look after the 5 of us. And she began having this mysterious phone caller late at night who, when she started objecting to him and fighting back, he started to visit the house and harass her from outside the house and frighten the heck out of her. And she basically spent the best part of a year in a kind of war of wits, doing battle with this rather unpleasant character, getting precious little help from the police or anyone, until finally the guy got tired of doing battle with my mother and wound up transferring his affections onto some other poor woman in the town. Anyway, that was very much the jumping off point for this story of mine, which involves, it's a fictionalised town. It's called Moorabool, and in the summer of late 1966 and early 67, Hal and his little brother have just come to live in Moorabool. They're exploring the creek near their new home when they find the body of a dog that's been murdered rather horribly and stuffed into a rusty drum. At the same time, Constable Mick Goodenough, recently demoted from his big city job as a detective sergeant of homicide, who's also new in town and now the low man on the totem pole at Moorabool Police Station, one of his dogs has gone missing, like a number of other pets around the town. And when he finds him, the dog has been given a Christian burial and buried by Hal and his brother. When he finds the dog, he vows to get the man who has done this thing. And so there begins the 2 investigations, which gradually entwine Hal and Mick Goodenough. And together they go off in search of this character that Hal calls the Night Whistler. Hal was lying in the bath reading his William Tell comic when he heard a sound like fingernails tapping the window. He sat up startled, and the comic dropped into the soapy water. He fished it out fast, but it was a sodden mess, the ink already blotting. He heard footsteps, saw a shadow dart across the window. Dropping the soggy comic, he grabbed his towel, wiped the steam off the pane and tried to peer out. All he could see in the dark glass was his own wide-open eyes. A towel around his waist, he burst into the bedroom to see their mother locking the windows. She gave Hal a discreet head shake. Evan insisted someone was out there. Mum was adamant. No, it's only the wind. No, it isn't, Evan whispered. There's someone out there. Hal piped up, his voice trembling. It's the wind, Evan. Nothing to worry about. He'll be in a minute, honey. She kissed Evan goodnight and signalled Hal to follow her. As he closed the bedroom door, Hal breathed in her ear. He's outside. She put a finger to her lips and whispered, when he's asleep, I'll call the police. I need you to be strong, Hal. He nodded. She hugged him and he went back into the bedroom, told Evan everything was fine, go to sleep, and set about trying to do that himself. He listened as Evan began snoring. Hal was lying there, wide-eyed in the dark, when he heard the screen door burst open. Heart thumping, he slipped out of bed and crept into the kitchen. He saw his mother standing on the back porch, carving knife in her hand, jabbing it at the night, like it was someone's eyes she was stabbing, not just thin air. Go on, you coward, run, she said, and rushed out to the edge of the patio, savagely thrusting the knife. You gutless bastard, run! Hal crept out through the door and tiptoed towards her. The yard was empty, as if the inky blackness of the night had swallowed up whoever was out there. He moved closer, His foot crunched dirt and she spun around, thrusting the blade out, and froze with the knife practically in his face. An inch closer and the point would have taken his eye out. God! Oh my God, how? The knife clattered onto the patio. She wrapped her arms around him and squeezed for all she was worth. Don't tell Evan. Tell him what? It's just a whim. Mum, you're crushing me. She let him go and they stumbled back inside like a pair of sleepwalkers. Later, Hal was awoken from a dream where he heard screams. A lady was screaming, 2 or 3 awful screams coming from next door. He heard them, clear as anything. Sat up in bed. Silence. He opened his Venetians and looked out, trembling. Mrs. Next Door's light was out. It was so quiet now you could hear moths banging their wings against the glass and his brothers snoring. Screams hadn't disturbed Evan's beauty sleep. Not a sound from Mum's room either. It had seemed so real. But Hal definitely wasn't about to bang on Mrs. Armstrong's door and ask her if she was all right. He tried to imagine what she would say. You and your brat of a brother, get out! Smiling in the dark, he lay down again, glad it was just a nightmare. Odd that Mrs. Next Door had been in it. But he didn't think anything about it for long before he fell back to sleep. That night, Mick Goodenough sat on the bed facing the investigation wall reading a clipping. Many start on small animals, mice, birds, guinea pigs, progressing to cats and dogs, even horses. If he lives in a farming region, the sheep and cows of his neighbours are easy pickings. The sadistic psychopath may continue like this for some years until he exhausts his hunger for murder on the animals in his vicinity. Others use the animal killings to hone their skills until one day they leap from fantasy into reality and he spoke the last words. Start killing people. He wondered if there'd been any mysterious sheep deaths on the Petrovic farm out at Narrabri. He'd love to know what Peter really thought about animals. Might explain his reluctance to go near the Humphreys place. Then again, the lazy sod was averse to anything that meant getting his ass out of his chair. Mick went to the fridge, took the cat from its bag and studied its paw. What was it about these missing claws? It was not quite 10. He reached for the phone and asked for a Sydney number. Walshaw was at home. After 5 seconds of surprised catching up, Mick told him he had something to show him, something important. Wal didn't mention this was the first time he'd heard from his old colleague in over a year. When can you bring it in? Was all he said. Every light out and not even 10:30. It was one of those still country nights where the sky was so black and vast and so sprayed with endless shining clouds of stars that even an unbeliever could see God's creation if he only looked up. Not that Goodenough was thinking about God as he walked Katie and Willie Boy along the dark, empty back streets. He was mulling over the call he'd just had with Wal Shorb. Wal was the forensics expert from Sutherland Police who'd been one of the consultants on the Bardsley Beach murders. The best of them, some said. They'd talked about the Bardsley investigation tonight. Wal said it was just a big black hole into which the minister keeps tipping money because the public demands results, which there never will be, because we let him get away. They let him get away, Mick had said. No, we damn well let him get away. We spent too long chasing surfy boys, bickering over minutiae, covering our asses. Yes, Mick admitted, we had him in the net and we tipped him out. Now we have to live with it. Maybe we don't. Not forever. Things change. Maybe. Listen, Wal, I need a favour. Mick told him about the animal killer with a long and interrupted history, about the Humphreys family's nuisance caller and their midnight prowler, why he thought the three were one and the same. Told him about his murdered dog, the dead Siamese, the long-forgotten trail of mutilated pets. He told him he'd stored the cat in his fridge and wanted help identifying the wounds and the implements that had made them. Wal went quiet. Mick half expected him to scoff. When can you bring it in? I'm working on that. Maybe Tuesday. Tuesday's good. Mick had hung up, feeling like he was back in the driver's seat, pedal to the metal. He would have to clear this time away with Bradley somehow. leaned on him in the morning. They had crossed from the batsman's arms and were walking past the reserve when Katie stopped abruptly. Mick tugged the leash, but she dug her heels in. Next thing, she and Willy Boy were snarling and growling, straining at the leash. Before he could shut them up, the dogs were going ballistic at something or someone in the darkness of the park. Mick yanked their leads and ordered them to sit, but Katie was in a canine panic, her barks like furious screams, and even Willy Boy was working himself into a lather. Was it him, the animal killer with the scent of death clinging to him like aftershave? Mick wound the leashes around his fists and let the dogs drag him into the empty park. A breeze rustled the bushes, concealing any other movements. He stood by the phone box, the weak green light of its caged bulb washing over him, and scanned the area, adrenaline pumping through him. If I let them go, they'll take your head off soon as look at you, he spoke loudly into the darkness. Show yourself. He waited. No one appeared. Trees swayed. The bushes rustled. Goodenough held back the fretting dogs on their leads. Had he gone? Quietly slipped away? He must know these streets like a blind man knows the way to his bathroom. The barking stopped as abruptly as it had begun, and the dogs settled. Mick led them homeward, trying to ignore the feeling of eyes on him all the way. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that. That's from my book, The Night Whistler, and I really hope you want to read more. Bye now.